Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into a case that really sent shockwaves through, well, everything. E. Jean Carroll versus Donald Trump.
This one was huge.
It really was. I mean, this is the first time a former U.S. president has ever been found legally responsible for sexual abuse.
Yeah, it was definitely a landmark case, and there's
Yeah.
just so much to unpack.
There is. So where do we even begin? We're going to be using excerpts from a BBC News article from May 2023.
Good source.
Yeah.
So, to really understand the weight of this verdict, we need to remember the context. This case played out against the backdrop of the #MeToo movement,
It did.
a time when so many women were bravely coming forward with their own stories, often involving powerful men. This case kind of became symbolic of that whole movement.
All right, bringing those issues of power and accountability to the forefront. Okay, so let's break down the basics of the case.
Let's.
E. Jean Carroll, she's a well-known columnist, accused Donald Trump of raping her way back in 1996. This allegedly happened in a department store in Manhattan.
And it's important to remember this wasn't a criminal trial. This was a civil case.
Right, so what's the difference there?
In a civil case, the plaintiff in this case, E. Jean Carroll, is seeking financial damages, not criminal charges. The burden of proof is lower in a civil case.
Ah, okay. So, to prove guilt in a criminal case, prosecutors need to show it beyond a reasonable doubt.
Exactly, but in a civil case, it's preponderance of the evidence, meaning it's more likely than not that the defendant did it.
So that's why you might find someone liable in a civil case, even if there isn't enough evidence to convict them criminally.
Precisely. And in Carroll's case, she wasn't trying to put Trump in jail. She wanted to hold him financially accountable for the alleged assault and the damage it caused her.
Got it. And her lawsuit actually had two parts to it. One part focused on the alleged assault, and the other was for defamation.
That's right. The defamation part stemmed from some very public statements Trump made about Carroll on his social media platform, Truth Social.
Oh, right, where he basically called her a liar and attacked her character.
Exactly. So, after all this back and forth, what did the jury decide? Well, they found Trump liable for both sexual abuse and defamation.
Wow.
And they awarded Carroll $5 million in damages. But, and this is crucial, they did not find him liable for rape.
Hold on. They didn't find him liable for rape. What's the difference?
It all boils down to how the law defines these offenses. In this case, the jury felt Trump's actions met the definition of sexual abuse, but not the specific definition of rape under New York law.
Interesting. So that distinction was really important.
Absolutely. It shows how complex these legal battles can be. Okay, so how do you think Trump reacted to all this?
Well, knowing Trump, I'm guessing he wasn't thrilled.
Yeah, you could say that. He completely denied knowing Carroll, called the verdict a disgrace, and said it was all a politically motivated witch hunt to take him down.
Classic Trump.
And of course, his lawyer quickly announced they'd be appealing the decision.
It's like a broken record with him at this point, always deflecting blame and playing the victim. So now that we've got the background, let's get into Carol's account. What exactly did she say happened that day?
So according to Carroll, it started pretty innocently. She ran into Trump at the department store, and he was joking around, asking for her help picking out lingerie for someone.
Okay. Sounds harmless enough so far.
Right. But then, according to her, things took a very dark turn. Trump suggested she try on the lingerie.
Oh, no.
And when she went into a dressing room, she says he followed her, shut the door, pinned her against the wall, and assaulted her.
That's awful. Just hearing that is so chilling, even after all this time. Did she talk about how the alleged assault impacted her life?
She did. She testified that it left her deeply traumatized, plagued by guilt and shame. She even said she hasn't been able to have a romantic relationship since.
That's heartbreaking. It really shows the long-lasting and devastating impact these kinds of assaults can have on someone's life, even years later.
It does. And it reminds us that the emotional scars can be just as real and painful as any physical injuries. It's clear this wasn't just a simple, he said, she said. The jury had to base their decision on something, right? So what was Trump's defense? How did they counter Carroll's accusations?
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. Seems like a tricky situation to defend.
It was. Trump's lawyers didn't really present an alibi or offer any alternative explanations for what happened. Instead, they focused on discrediting Carroll's story,
Ah, I see.
picking apart her account and trying to raise doubts about her credibility.
Like what specifically?
Well, they questioned why she didn't scream for help during the alleged assault.
Oh, right. A common tactic, unfortunately.
And they pointed out the lack of witnesses.
trying to suggest that if it had really happened the way she described, there would have been more evidence someone would have intervened.
Exactly. They tried to paint her story as implausible, lacking the kind of solid evidence needed in a civil case.
And on top of all that, we can't forget that Trump himself very publicly denied the accusations, using his huge social media platform to further sow those seeds of doubt.
Absolutely. It was a powerful way to control the narrative and sway public opinion, which to some extent it did. But the jury's focus had to be on the evidence presented in court, not on social media or headlines.
Right. This case really grabbed the world's attention. It felt like everyone was talking about it.
It did. It was everywhere. And you mentioned the hashtag #MeToo movement earlier. How did this verdict fit into that broader context?
Well, for a lot of people, especially survivors of assault, the verdict was a huge victory for the hashtag #MeToo movement. It showed that even powerful figures like a former president could be held accountable for their actions, at least in a court of law.
It was definitely a turning point for many. Proof that the legal system could actually deliver justice in these cases, no matter the perpetrator's status or power.
Gave hope to a lot of people who felt like powerful people could just act with impunity. Maybe this verdict will embolden other survivors to come forward, share their own stories.
I think so too. It sends a strong message when someone can successfully sue a former president for sexual abuse.
It shows that it is possible. And it might inspire others who might felt intimidated or afraid to speak up. This case wasn't just about E. Jean Carroll and Donald Trump. It became a symbol of something much bigger,
It really did. A societal reckoning with sexual assault and the abuse of power.
forcing us as a society to confront some really uncomfortable truths about consent, power dynamics, the importance of believing survivors.
And it brought to light the challenges survivors face when they do come forward, especially when they're accusing someone wealthy and powerful.
The deck often feels stacked against them, doesn't it? It's worth noting that Carol is one of over a dozen women who've publicly accused Trump of sexual misconduct, even though those other allegations weren't part of this specific case.
Right. Even though those other accusations weren't part of the trial, they add another layer of complexity to this whole situation. Makes you think about the broader pattern of behavior, the potential for abuse when someone holds that much authority.
It does. It really raises questions about power dynamics and how important it is to carefully examine the behavior of those in power, holding our leaders to a high standard, making sure there are real consequences for their actions. This case really has so many layers to it. It's incredible. We've gone over the allegations, the trial, and even the bigger societal impact. But before we finish up, I want to circle back to something you mentioned before, the fact that Carol is just one of many women who've accused Trump of misconduct.
It's a big deal, even though those other allegations weren't directly part of this trial. The fact that multiple women have come forward independently with similar accusations, that creates a pattern that's pretty hard to ignore. Raises serious questions about Trump's behavior and how he treats women.
It does make you think. Someone in such a position of authority, the potential for abuse is just there.
Exactly. And this whole case emphasizes how crucial accountability is, how we as a society react to these situations. We can't just brush these accusations aside. It's about creating an environment where people feel safe coming forward, knowing their stories will be taken seriously, and making sure there are real consequences for those who abuse their power.
So where do we go from here? What's the lasting impact of this verdict, both legally and in our society?
Well, legally, it sets a major precedent. It shows that no one is above the law, not even a former president. It sends a clear message. These allegations will be taken seriously. Socially, I think this case helped change the conversation around sexual assault and abuse of power. Survivors' voices were amplified, and it encouraged more people to speak out against these injustices.
It feels like we're at a turning point, a real shift in the balance of power.
I hope that's true, but real change takes constant work. We need to keep having these difficult conversations, keep pushing for accountability, challenging the systems that let abuse continue.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We really went deep into this case, explored the legal system, even touched on the fight for justice and accountability.
It was a great discussion. This case really opens up so many important issues that we need to address as a society. We have to face some uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, the fact that sexual violence is so widespread. But there's hope. This case shows that change is possible.
So much to think about. Any final thoughts for our listeners as they process all of this?
There are some crucial questions we're left with. What does this verdict mean for holding powerful people accountable? How will it affect future cases of sexual assault allegations, especially against high-profile figures? These are the things we'll continue to grapple with as a society. And everyone needs to stay involved in these vital conversations.
That's a powerful message to end on. Thanks for joining us today. It's been amazing to dive into all this with you. And until next time, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep working towards a more just world for everyone.